almost 50 people online, and it's 5 after, so let's start today's event. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to this Zoom event called Stronger Together, How Hong Kong Associations Support the Asian American Community. My name is Donald Moore. I'm the chairman of the Hong Kong Association of New York. I'll be your moderator today. Today's topics and features focus on certain challenges to the Asian American communities, including dramatic increase in hate crimes. My research shows that reports of hate crimes against Asians have increased over 150% as far as reported crimes go. And I personally even know some of my friends who feel reluctant to go out at night alone or go out at night. So I think the questions are like, how did we get here and what can we do about it? And our speakers will discuss some of those issues. We want to thank our co-hosts today. We have the Hong Kong Association of New York, we have the Hong Kong Association of Atlanta, and the Hong Kong Association of Northern California. And special thanks for additional contributions by the Hong Kong Association of Southern California, Hong Kong Business Association of Nevada, Hong Kong Business Association of Hawaii, and the Hong Kong Business Association of the Midwest. So again, my name is Donald Moore. I'm chairman of the Hong Kong Association of New York, and I'm the moderator today. We're lucky to have some excellent speakers whom I'll introduce to you in a moment. But we'll start with some reminders about how the event will proceed. If you have a message or a problem in any part of this video, please just message us and we'll try to solve those problems for you. Please keep yourself mute as we'll have opportunities for Q&A through the Q&A portal, but not through conversation. And then again, please submit your questions as we go along in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will try to aggregate those collectively and sometimes maybe put a couple together or weed out things that are maybe the same question, but we'll try to get to everybody's questions. If you have a question for a particular person, please note that in your question. That will be helpful. And then finally, please note that today's meeting is recorded. So if you put your name or your question out there, please note that may end up on social media or on YouTube or something similar to that. So but before I introduce the speakers, I'm going to introduce Mark Staublin. He's the chairman of National U.S. Hong Kong Business Association, and he's the chairman of the Hong Kong Business Association of the Midwest, and he's also senior vice president of business development of Garrett Brands. So Mark, please give us some of your introductory remarks, please.
Great, thank you so much, Don. Thank you everyone for having us. As Don said, I am the chairman of the NSUHKBA, as we affectionately call it, the National U.S. Hong Kong Business Associations, where all 12 associations are part of a national organization. So on behalf of NSUHKBA, I'd like to thank the following attendees for contributing today. Start with Mr. Ralph Chow, who's the regional director of Hong Kong TDC in New York, Anna Fang, who's the director of Hong Kong TDC New York, Tiffany Wong, director of HKTDC LA, and Emily Eng, the deputy director of Hong Kong ETO San Francisco. Adding to that, our VIP family continues with Candy Nip, who is the director of ETO out of New York, Erica Lamb, who's the deputy director of ETO out of New York, Heidi Liu, head of communications and PR, and Gardy Mak, the EA to the director. Carrie Bonner, a senior manager from Invest Hong Kong, Irene Yi Riley of San Francisco Human Rights Commissioner, Susan Allen, who is the national president and CEO of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Dennis Lee, who is the EVP of the Hong Kong Business Association of Southern California. I think that there's maybe a couple others I'd like to thank for their participation today. Mr. Henry Yu, who's going to be one of our speakers, who is the Hong Kong Business Association president for the National NSUHKBA. The Honorable Anders Fung, the council member of the city of Millbrae, California, is one of our speakers, and Fred Teng, New York Police Department's Hate Crime Review Panel and president of the American Chinese Public Affairs. Thank you all for attending and for your contributions today. You mentioned it, Don. Hate crimes have risen, and they've risen way too much. There is no place for hate. We are grateful for the groups gathered here today, and I hope that some of the ideas that we are going to be discussing can be repurposed in your own place of business and in your own backyard. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back to you, Don.
Well, thanks, Mark. And I also hope that we come up with some actionable understanding of issues that might be put to good use today as well. So as Mark indicated, we have 3 speakers today, and one's from California, one's from New York, one's from Atlanta. That reflects, I think, the growing interrelation, I guess, between the different Hong Kong associations and the increasing collaboration, I guess is a better word. And that's been one of the benefits of pandemic and Zoom, is that we've actually been able to collaborate quite a bit more than we were kind of operating in our own little silos in our own cities at the time. So I'll briefly introduce again each one of them as we go forward. I may ask a question at the end of each one, but we'll hold most of the questions probably till the end. And so please get your questions, think about those questions and submit them into the Q&A panel, please. So we're going to start with the Honorable Anders Fung. As mentioned, he's a council member in the city of Millbrae, and he's going to be talking about supportive policies for local Asian American communities in California. So Anders, please go ahead.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you so very much. And I also like to thank the entire Hong Kong associations and different chapters for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. Again, my name is Anders Fung, but first of all, in light of what happened in San Jose today, I'd like to say a few words about what happened. So I was quite devastated by some of the horrific shooting incidents that just happened in San Jose this morning. Our heart goes out to the families who lost their loved ones, as well as those who are affected by the shooting incidents. This is just another tragedy involving gun violence, as well as mental health issues. And issues continue to plague our country and our state, and communities must come together and take mental health issues seriously. And incidents such as this could certainly be avoided if we all can just dedicate it proper resources from, we put between prevention to outreach to proper training to our first responders, as well as clinical treatments to those in need of those assistance. So again, 9 too many lives have been lost today to gun violence and mental health issue. And our heart goes out to the families affected by this. So with that, as far as our discussion of today, the rising anti-Asian violence, the hate crimes and the xenophobias continue to be our national issues. And these issues really need no introductions to anyone that is on this call today. And so, we've all seen the TV, and I don't think anybody can turn on the TV today without witnessing yet another crime committed against the Asian American community. We've seen that 84-year-old AAPI seniors being killed in his own driveway. 2 senior women recently were stabbed while waiting for public transportation in downtown San Francisco in the financial district. And we all saw the video of a young man in New York subway being bitten until he was unconscious. So, seeing this large uptick of hate crime committed against our community, many of those I can pretty much contribute it to those hateful rhetoric, the divisive the narrative of our previous Trump administrations. We had a president who openly blamed the Chinese for causing the global pandemic, as well as blaming China for the ever-widening Sino-U.S. trade gap. And all this have insinuated an anti-Chinese and anti-Asian sentiment throughout the entire country. I've been in this country for over 30 years, and seeing this level of hate crime and xenophobia, it's really unseen in the recent U.S. history. Now, in terms of being in the Bay Area, where I reside, according to the 2010 census, we've got about 33% of our population in San Francisco declare themselves as Asian Pacific Islanders. In San Mateo County, where I reside, personally that statistics, it's about 25%. And that's according to census that was about 11 years ago. And in my jurisdiction, city of Millbrae, we have nearly 50% of our population that declare themselves as API, where ethnic Chinese are approximately 40%. So we're we have a pretty diverse population demographic here in our part of this country. In terms of some of the things that we've been seeing in terms of activities, given some of the hate crime that we've been seeing throughout the Bay Area and throughout the country, I recently sent out an open letter on February 23rd to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors and the District Attorney, calling for legislative actions to aggressively prosecute and take zero-tolerance stance against these hate crime committed against our community. And since February, there's been many anti-Asian hate rallies throughout the entire Bay Area cities, some in San Mateo, some in Oakland and Fremont, and in San Francisco. Personally, I've held another rally in Millbrae, where my jurisdiction is, on April 17, and it was well attended by the Lieutenant Governor, as well as over 500 people. And on May 15, along with a group of young volunteers, we stepped up the effort a little bit more and organized another rally in San Mateo throughout for the county-wide rally. And the theme of the day was Communities United, and be able to unite all the communities against all these hate crimes, as well as all the xenophobias that we've been seeing among all the marginalized communities, in addition to the APIs. Very well attended, and Congresswoman Jackie Spear was also in the audience, and she even gave the API community a U.S. flag that used to be flown in the U.S. Capitol. And her message to us was really to demonstrate the unity with the API community and recognition and the contribution that the API community has made for this country since we built the railroad, as well as commitment to support a diverse and inclusive environment in our community, and supporting our effort to continue to bring about the awareness and the need to take bold and immediate actions against these horrific and senseless violence committed against our seniors, and especially the most vulnerable. And so as far as call to action, I think we need to take a more proactive approach in dealing with these issues, such as continue to push for the legislative changes at every level of the government, especially at the state. We need to put more tools into the toolbox of our district attorneys to prosecute these crimes, continue to widen the definitions of hate crimes, and enhance the penalties on these horrific acts, particularly on those that involve weapons, as well as those who committed crime against our seniors and the most vulnerable people, women and children. Working with the state and local government to dedicate additional resources to outreach our API communities. Many of these crimes actually went underreported in terms of statistics. They're largely contributing to some of the factors such as, we have a lot of language barrier as far as our senior goes. They don't speak the language, so talking to the police and the sheriffs is a very difficult task for them. And some due to just the cultural differences that they just do not want to speak to the authorities and the law enforcement. Some of them have psychological reasons, such as they just stop blaming themselves for the crime committed against them, or just being shameful, the inside guilt of being a victim of a crime. And some simply think that reporting a crime may not necessarily be helpful because they're not likely to be investigated or prosecuted, and simply be afraid of retaliation. So some of these reasons contributed to the underreporting of these crimes. So we must continue to do these educations and really start discussing these issues at length in school, and that to teach our children that racism is not okay. Xenophobia such as Kung flu, Chinese virus are not okay. This country really is founded by immigrants, and diversity and inclusiveness really are the fundamental values and principles that we all must share, uphold, and continue to defend. So with that, I just kind of want to share a little bit of an example with everyone in the audience today. I went to see my dentist last week, and the hygienist She came from Guangzhou. She speaks Cantonese with me, and she recognizes me for being a local council member. And we started talking about, some of the things that's been happening in the Asian American community, and that she used to live in San Francisco, in the city. And she's been seeing a lot of these issues regarding safety and feeling unsafe. And she moved with her husband and 2 children to a suburb. And she was telling me that she feel more safe. And she recently moved to a white people neighborhood. And when I hear that, my first reaction was, we, the Chinese and Asian Americans, sort of felt that, we're at this perpetual mindset of being a foreigner in this country, moving into a white people neighborhood. And yet, this is supposed to be a neighborhood for everybody. And that, we should feel home and we should feel safe. So having that mindset in itself reminds all of us that we need to continue to teach our children that, we belong in this country rightfully, and it was founded on immigrants, by immigrants, and inclusiveness as well as just diversity is a fundamental principle of this country. So, as a council member, as a civil servant, and as the only first-generation Chinese American immigrant, born and raised in Hong Kong, by the way, elected official in San Mateo County, here are some of the things that I see as an important priority for us that I think we really need to advance these agendas. First, I continue to work with the California state legislatures and to widen the definitions of hate crime and protect the most vulnerable API communities members, especially our seniors, and enhance the penalty on those who committed hate crimes, and especially with special circumstances, such as the use of weapons and bodily injury with racially motivated animus. And lately, I've had the opportunity of working with State Senator Josh Becker in drafting legislation to do just these things. And hopefully we can bring forward a legislation that we can all share with the API community as at large, and really open up the discussions on how to protect and make everyone feel safe again. So, and I also recently have been working with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office and creating and instigating a new community liaison program where the sheriff has actually agreed to dedicate additional law enforcement resources, a high-ranking Asian language speaking officers to serve as a liaison dedicated to the API community. The goal is to ensure that these hate crimes are properly reported, properly investigated and prosecuted, and to continue to educate our public as to how to protect themselves and for crime preventions. And so lastly, last week, the Biden administration signed into a new law of the anti-hate crime bill, where they will dedicate new DOJ resources to prosecute these hate crimes at a federal level, and also through the Health and Human Service agencies under the new Secretary Becerra, who used to be the California Attorney General. Grants will be available to conduct crime reduction programs to prevent and respond to these hate crimes. So I encourage all the Asian American in all communities throughout the entire country to establish their own NPO, nonprofit organizations, to apply for these federal grants that would help bring additional resources to law enforcement and educations and crime preventions that will help the victims of these hate crimes. I myself will do exactly that, forming a new nonprofit and working through our Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office and apply for these federal grants. Hopefully I can instigate a program of anti-hate crime task force in conjunction with our local sheriff's office and bring about more additional law enforcement resources and education, and to keep our community safe.
Well, thank you, Andrew. So there's a lot of questions I'm sure we can cover at the end of the speaker's part of the program. But one question I was wondering before we go on to Fred is California in any way different, maybe better or worse, doing something better, leading by example, not leading by example? Any thoughts about that compared to the rest?
I will say I have been working with the legislature, and the message is very clear that we need to take bold and decisive legislative actions to protect the most vulnerable. Our seniors, our API community members, just like as we protect our young women, for example. I mean, there's no mistaking that you're attacking, an 84-year-old Asian man in his own driveway. In much the same way, protecting our young women. And so I think the message is loud and clear, and the national message is there. And we are going to take very decisive action in legislatively, as well as from a law enforcement perspective, to keep our communities safe. And that's the first priority for us.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, why don't we move on to Fred Teng. Fred is a community leader. He's involved in the New York Police Department's Hate Crime Review Panel. He's also the president of America-China Public Affairs Institute. I also note he's the former chairman of the Hong Kong Association of New York, so one of my predecessors. He's going to be talking about local strategies in New York, including that hate crime review panel, the self-defense course also taught by the police department, and a project called the Yellow Whistle Project. Fred?
Thank you. Before I start, I actually want to talk about, because we're seeing, calling it a wave of anti-Asian hate crime. But in reality, it's an anti-China and anti-Chinese crime. And this is stemmed from the political extremists like our former president and our former Secretary of State, because they never say anything bad or hate towards Japanese, towards Filipino, towards Indian, towards Vietnamese, towards Korean. Now, however, the Asian as a whole do get hurt because people mistaken someone of an Asian feature, and as well, they get hurt by it. Just like Vincent Chin was mistaken as Japanese. But I do want to talk about, unless we deal with the issue at hand, we are not going to solve this problem if we just going to lump everything together. And however, the political environment is so poisoned right now. No politicians were willing to talk about Chinese and China. They will not bring up these two words. So they lump it together and call this is an anti-Asian hate crime. I just want to make that. Secondly is hate crime, while it's not legal in the United States, hate speech is protected. And we really need to work on that, because all violence, all hate crime starts with speech. Unless we start to work on hate speech and start making some of the hate speech illegal, not just against Asians, against anyone, we're not going to solve these problems. We cannot bring in the police after the people get beaten up. We got to stop politicians, we got to stop media from having hate speeches spreading around. So now let me talk about what I have done. I have been working with the New York Police Department at least 5-6 years ago. I started off is that I never want to see a Chinese Lives Matter demonstration on the street. To me is that if we have that, some Chinese would have died already. My thought at that time was that the Chinese community and NYPD might have conflict. So I start working with the commissioner. We're hosting lunches with the commissioner that he come and give us reports. And we have all the law enforcement. Working with the police department, not just in New York, but we expand into Nassau, Suffolk County, in Westchester County. We work with the township police, as well as police organizations. We work with the police unions, and we work with police support organizations, such as Silver Shield Foundation. Silver Shield Foundation, they support the education of children of line of duty sacrificed officers. At the beginning of this COVID, we donated over 100,000 face masks to the law enforcement, not just for them, but for their family member, because the law enforcement will get the supply, and we hope that their family will be also be protected. So because of my working relationship with them, this time when they want to establish a hate crime review panel, and this is about all hate crime, not just about anti-Asian hate crime, they asked me to join, and I agreed to join it. And really, we have been learning a lot about hate crime, both from the police department's hate crime unit, as well as from the district attorney's office. We're working with them, looking at the law, looking at the parameters, so that Why should we charge someone for hate crime? What difference does it make? How does a hate crime can be charged, and so on and so forth? And we talk about mental cases. It is true that a lot of these people have mental cases to start off with, and that is a much bigger issue for our nation to deal with. If we don't deal with that, there's hate all over the place, and it will be very hard to deal with. The NYPD in last August already established a Asian hate crime task force. These are all police officers, volunteer, about 30 of them, all have language skills, and they're doing it above and beyond their duty, meaning they still have to do their full-time job as well as taking on any cases that's related to Asian hate crime. And beyond that, so we'll start talking about personal safety classes. So we have held personal safety classes in Queens, in Brooklyn, and in Manhattan. And my organization, we're expanding to outside of New York City, to Westchester County, to Long Island, etc. And these are classes to teach people in terms of the awareness, in terms of how they should, not so much of fighting someone, but how do you run away? And it's been very successful. And what we're doing is to bring awareness, and we are not stopping. We will continue to do these classes and hopefully spreading all over the country, hoping everybody can start doing that. Because as a community, we need to wake up. We need to protect ourselves because nobody else will. And so we're doing this. And lastly, I want to talk about is a friend of mine, Mr. Oscar Teng, and his wife, Agnes Teng. They come up with an idea called the yellow whistle. It is this whistle, and very loud. The whistle, it's a great idea. Why yellow, first of all? Yellow is the beauty of the nature, is the sunshine, is the reflection of the moon and daffodils and all kinds of great things. But yellow is also a discrimination against Chinese. They call us yellow people, they call us yellow skin, and they also associated the color yellow to cowardness. So we're going to fight them with this discrimination against them. Just like the Jewish people, when they asked them to put the Star of David during the Second World War, you all seen that in a movie. When the state of Israel was established, they put that emblem on their flag, national flag. So we are doing this. At the end, we probably will have 2.5 million such whistles distributed throughout this nation. And this is, I just got on a call with them yesterday. We're no longer just for the Asian community. We're spreading to all community if they need so. And the whistle is that if you're a victim, blow the whistle. If you see somebody getting beat up, blow the whistle. So imagine if somebody getting beat up, but you don't want to get involved, but 5 or 6 people start blowing this whistle. That's going to deter the attacker. And this whistle is not just being attacked. If a old lady fell down on the street, blow the whistle. So this whistle, and as you know, after this whole crime wave happened, many people was talking about getting guns, getting knives, getting tasers, getting a pepper spray. Well, a lot of these things, there's legal issues involved to possess them and to discharge them. Some of the things you can own them, but you cannot use them, because if you use them, you will be against the law. Just like, you know, you can buy a kitchen knife this long, but if you use it in your kitchen, it's okay. You bring it on the street, the police gonna ask you a question. The whistle, however, is perfectly legal to own and perfectly legal to discharge. Nobody is gonna arrest you for blowing a whistle. So we think this is a really great idea, and we are making distribution to senior centers, to churches, to groups, young children, old ladies, anyone. And this is, we put it on the arm like this. The reason is that if you put it around the neck, where some people say, well, why don't you put it around the neck? Putting around the neck, somebody can choke you. Unless, like, I have a special lanyard, this one breaks, then you can wear it around your neck. But if not, put it around your wrist. And so anyway, so these are some of the effort, and we wanted to share with everyone in terms of, especially working with the police, because I have done that quite a lot, and I think that they are very, very helpful. At the beginning of the COVID last year, a rapper had a song and telling people to go down to Chinatown and kill all the people. And right away, we made a call, and the NYPD have the patrol car circle around, park around the Chinatown, just as a show of force. So I just want to, share some of the things that we have done, but we'll continue to looking at new ways that we can help the community to strengthen themselves, not to fight with people, but to keep the perpetrators away from our community. So thank you. I cannot hear you. Oh, start, mute.
I made a Zoom faux pas.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Fred, for those very interesting initiatives. Of course, I just think it's shameful as a society that we have to actually teach people how to defend themselves. It reminds me, in my law firm, we had a active shooter training, and I thought that can't possibly be the right best answer for for gun violence, is just to teach people how to hide and run inside their own offices or homes. It's just amazing to me that kind of we're at that level. But I did wonder for the review panel, are they coming out with reports, like very sort of interesting reports? I'm particularly interested, you mentioned about mental health, because it's easy to sort of dismiss it, say, oh, these are just a bunch of crazy people. But of course, people who are unstable are easily influenced by negative language from other people. So that's part of what's happening. But are there any sort of takeaways from some of the early reports of the panel?
So this is what happened. We have had, the organizing took us a couple months, and we announced it in April. And last week we had our first monthly meeting. We will be meeting every month, and then by conference call, if necessary, every other week, and even emergency meetings. So the first step, what we did was to have reviews with the district attorney's office and the police department in terms of getting when a crime, first of all, a hate crime, first you have to commit a crime. That's why hate speech is not part of that. So if somebody have to, and so we have to learn the complexity of the situation. Secondly, you mentioned mentally ill, and we have raised that question. If somebody committed a crime, the police department is to arrest them. They're not there to question whether they're mentally ill or they can be excused. It is up to the judge, or most likely that person's defense lawyer will ask for an examination, and then going from there. You said that maybe we shouldn't have to learn how to defend ourselves, but we have too much hate in our country right now, way too much. It's not just Asians. It's so many people hating so many people, and we allow the speech to continue as a freedom, which is absolutely ridiculous. And unless we start stopping hate speeches, we're not going to see the hate crime have any subsiding. It will continue to happen. If it's not right now, there's a whole wave of Jewish people being attacked, and they were being attacked before the COVID, and it's just one after the other, because we keep on scapegoating other people. And sorry, Councilman Fung, but I think a lot of the politicians are not taking responsibility to taking care of our country, and all they do is making political speeches. So that's very, very, very unfortunate, and I think that a lot of blame to go around. And as citizens, all we can do is try to defend ourselves, because we don't want to be a victim.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. All right, well, thanks for now, Fred. I'm sure there'll be more questions after our next speaker, which is Henry Yu. Henry is the president of the Hong Kong Association of Atlanta, very active branch of the Hong Kong Associations. He's the president of the National U.S. Hong Kong Business Association, so he works with Mark on that regard. He's the executive committee member of the Federation of Hong Kong Business Associations Worldwide, which is based in Hong Kong. And he's going to be talking about business cooperation, educational initiatives to promote inclusion and diversity in Atlanta. Henry, are you ready?
Yep.
Great.
Thank you, Don. Well, certainly it's an honor to be sharing my thoughts and what has happened and transpired in Atlanta with both Fred and Anders. And I certainly agree with comments from the two gentlemen, I think silence is not an option for us, and we have to speak up and take bold actions. And I would like to also add, we should also brag about our AAPI accomplishment as well as achievement in our society. I think this is something that might, I guess, discussion is going to focus on education and creating awareness, but more importantly, working in partnership. I think this is a public-private partnership. You know, obviously the legal enforcement, the elected officials, including AAPI officials, need to work closely with all the community group leaders, Asian community group leaders, as well as mainstream community groups, as well as mainstream companies in creating awareness and taking actions. You know, just celebrating every May as the Heritage Month is not enough. I think this is an ongoing effort that needs to be addressed and take bold action as suggested by Anders. Now, what has happened in mid-March really is a awakening to the entire Atlanta and Georgia communities, and including government level as well as local companies. The killing of 8 innocent citizens, 6 of them are Asian American women. Since the event, there has been many interactive discussion among different groups involving the entire, I guess, Atlanta City as well as the state level. And certainly, I would like to share with you in terms of particularly some of the efforts that I've been involved. Certainly, which I think is great news, because in Atlanta, Georgia, some of the major companies have Asian resources group like other companies from other cities, but they have been a lot more proactive in addressing this issue. And I can give you a few examples, I think, which is very important. This will be an ongoing effort, and I know there are many of the Asian resources group of major companies, including small, medium-sized companies, addressing the AAPI issues. But addressing it is not enough. So I've touched base with a few of the companies. For example, JP Morgan Chase, they have an Asian group called Aspire. And they actually have employed, I believe, at least nationally and in Atlanta, over 10% of the total employee are Asian American professionals. So they are also addressing this, and actually the message is that they need to work closely with mainstream as well as Asian American resources group and other resources group, as well as community groups from Asia. I've also talked to, I think one of the company is called April, a CPA firm. Actually, the CEO, right after the mid-March event, put together an email advising all the Asian American and also all employees on the quote-unquote value differences, promoting awareness, but also making sure that some of the AAPI employees, are aware of the support from senior management. But more importantly, is because this is a segment of the business very important. I can share with you others, such as Home Depot, Coca-Cola, Delta, and you name it, and including even a law firm such as Smith, Gambriel, and Russell. So I think now we're getting the attention. And after all, I think from the discussion with all those Asian resources employees, as well as some of this senior management team, they recognize this is a very important business segment of the business, AAPI. So right now, they are willing to really proactively address it and take action. So I think working closely with the major corporations, including small and medium-sized companies, about awareness of what Asians contribute to the society is very important, but also that helps in terms of funding, which is very important. Now, on the community groups, among Asian community groups in Georgia, actually there are many summits and webinars, whatever you call, is create awareness, and also more importantly to have a pool of resources available for the citizens in Georgia and certainly Atlanta to be conscious of and reach out to all those nonprofit organizations. And I can tell you that, for example, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce, They both are taking a very proactive role in addressing AAPI issues because there's a huge, certainly in Gwinnett County, huge population of Asian businesses. As a matter of fact, they will be putting together, I think they just had a sort of a community outreach, safety and awareness for the AAPI business, which is very important. On the same issue, I think Carter Center, I know that this Saturday they have a race issue discussion, which include all the Asian groups in town, and certainly that is very, very thoughtful of the center. As well as groups such as the Asian American Advancing Justice Atlanta, very proactive in helping, particularly the underprivileged, under-resourced group of AAPI. After all, again, this is all stereotyping. I mean, all Asians are rich or making a lot of money, household income, I don't know, $85,000. But when you look at the economic inequality among the top Asian earners and the bottom Asian earners, you're looking at basically, I think top are making more than 10 times the bottom Asian earners. So this is a big, big disparity. So we have to change the narrative, more than just, we are not your model minority. We have also other issues typical, just like any Americans. We pay taxes, we collect Social Security taxes, we watch football games and basketball games. So we want to be equal participants. Now, with that, I also want to stress, I think the importance of each city working closely with other cities and states on a national level. And I'm glad to report, actually, after the event in mid-March, some of the local elected AAPI officials have already teamed up with, for example, in California, I believe Representative Judy Chu, as well as the New York Representative Grace Meng has already had several actually interactive discussion with our Atlanta, Georgia citizens, as well as actually visiting Georgia, I believe was the last month. So all this has basically taken place since mid-March. And certainly, I think it's time to call for action, bold action. So my suggestion is really, I think Hong Kong Association in U.S. can play a key role. After all, we are a connector and networking group that bring all parties together, right? After all, we have been promoting actually global trade, between Hong Kong, China, Asia, and the rest of the world. So why not? This is certainly Hong Kong. I'm willing to share. I'm sure that our Hong Kong Association group in U.S. are also doing similar things. For example, in Atlanta, the Hong Kong Association of Atlanta, we have two signature events. One being the annual Spring Festival, Spring Reception, held around January or February of each year, as well as the annual Dragon Boat Festival. And I've already talked to some of our board members that we will be aggressively addressing using those two events to promote, to increase press coverage, to include major corporations, Asian Resources Group, but more importantly, to promote, to convey to our citizens in Georgia that, Hong Kong could be your connector and conduit on the AAPI issues, whether it's cultural, business, or educational. I guess those are my comments, and I do welcome suggestions and questions from Don and our audience.
Well, great, Henry, thanks. And you said something, silence is not an option. And I in preparing for this event, I was looking at some things and I was reminded of Edmund Burke's quote, which basically is something like, for evil to succeed, all it takes is for good people to do nothing. And that seems to be kind of appropriate for this. And it sort of matches also what I hear a lot over the last year, maybe it was before that, but I just started realizing turning the term from being someone saying they're non-racist and people saying that's not enough. You have to be anti-racist. You actually have to do something. You can't just sit there and say, well, I'm not racist, and think that that's good enough. And so I guess my question then is, and maybe this is a little bit open for everybody, is that implies that people outside the community also have to be doing something, not just people in the community saying this is happening and we need to have better laws. And so that's obviously very important. Do you see that happening? Do you get response from that, from outside the community? when you're asking people to be actively anti-racist or to do something and not do nothing? Whether it's from government or from businesses or individuals or organizations?
I guess my comment is, all life matters. And certainly for, at least from talking to major companies, I think they are taking this very seriously, not just the AAPI segment of the business, or at least AAPI employees. It goes to all employees. So as a matter of fact, I think this is something that I will be actively involved with the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. We will have our first sort of roundtable discussion. These are some of the actionable items that we will hopefully implement, or at least make an effort to address and work on that. Is on a quarterly basis, all the Asian resources group of the major company will get together, and then to address hate crime, not just AAPI, but obviously the AAPI is important, as well as some of the Black communities and other minority groups. It has to be a collective effort from getting ideas from different groups, which is very key to the success.
Sure.
In terms of the endeavor.
So Fred Manders, oh sorry, did you have something more, Henry?
No, I think that's my own
I'm
comment.
just wondering whether you're seeing lip service or you're actually seeing receptivity from people outside the community, whether it's government and so on, to actually do something.
Well, so I'll sort of take a crack at it, Donald. Thanks for the question. In terms of your earlier remarks, I think we need to be vigilant and continue to make it easier for community members to report these hate crimes, right? Raising awareness is one thing, but yet making it easy for these things to be reported and to have the proper authority to respond to it is extremely important. I mean, everybody has a cell phone these days, right? Everybody has a camera in their pocket. I mean, just look at what happened in New York. That young man in the subway. I mean, he was beaten almost to death. He was choked. He was, he was being beaten to the point where he was unconscious. And yet people were taking videos of it, right? And that lasted for over, about 2-3 minutes at least. And so, I had the privilege and took an initiative to start working with some of the organizations like ACLU. They have Mobile Justice, which is one of the software that they have used in the past as a platform to report, to report police brutality in the past, and been in contact with some of their ACLU people here in the California chapter, try to figure out a way how to make use of these cell phone applications to make it easier for hate crime reporting, right? The moment you take a video, what happened, right? Someone, whether it's being a xenophobia or some old man being beaten up in his own driveway, for example, with the GPS information that has been inherent in everybody's cell phone, take a video and have it reported right away and have the law enforcement to respond to that immediately. So, it makes it a little bit more easier for these crimes to be reported, makes it more difficult for these crimes to go unreported. Continue to bring about these awareness and ensure that everybody has a say in this and everybody can be a protector. Everybody, in addition to blowing the whistle, can actually take action to stop these crimes, to report these crimes, and to keep your community and your family and your neighbors safe. So I think this is one thing that we all need to continue to work on and be very conscientious about, and make an answer on.
Yeah. Fred, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think that, I agree with Anders in terms of we need to report, because right now there is, especially we find out that when people are personally attacked, they tend not to report it, a smallest percentage. If their home is robbed, almost 99% of them, they all report them because they have to claim insurance, I guess. Sure. But before we report a hate crime, we can report a crime, but if we want to say it's a hate crime, we must collect the evidence. Whether it's the victim or the bystander must hear what this person has said, if he has indicated any of the hate. So we need to understand the law. What is a hate crime? What groups are covered under the hate crime? And what kind of crime? And their category. I do think we need to educate the community so that they are well versed in this issue, so they can be much better advocates themselves. And they'll understand, oh, this is a hate crime. You know, if somebody draw a swastika on the window and you can using water to spray it off, that's not a hate crime because there's no damage to the property. I mean, it gets to that complexity. But if they're using a acid or they scratch it, that becomes a crime because there's a damage to property. So we need to know all about this, but we also need to fix the law so that the people who are doing the hate, we need to take care of them. It's not that they can get away with the loopholes.
Sure, no, that's interesting. Because there's all kinds of legal and constitutional issues driving those decisions, and those are always complicated. That's why it takes hard work to get to that point. So a couple questions in the chat room. One basically is, what's the attitude in DC, which I would probably think Congress and Department of Justice, maybe other areas. Are you seeing receptivity in response from Washington on these issues?
I can take a crack at it. I mean, with the swift and bipartisan support that you've seen in Congress, I mean, as you well know how divided our current country is, and also the political ideology between the Republicans and the Democrats, and you see this anti-Asian hate crime bill passed almost unanimously throughout the entire Congress. It shows that there is an urgency, and there is a solidarity, and there is a sense of it's call for action where it has gotten to the point where it is a national topic. And I've been in this country for over 30 years, and I've never seen hate crime rising to the level that we've seen like this. And it's on the news, it's in your face, it's gotten to the point where it's really unacceptable. I mean, and the people are afraid to go out, right? My parents are afraid to walk out of their driveway, and they live in San Francisco. And so, I believe it has gone to the national stage, and it really is time for the Asian Americans to really stand up, and, for lack of a better word, ensuring that we get our fair share of resources to ensure that these things don't happen to any of us again. Our community needs to feel safe, and additional resources call for. And as you can see how these federal legislation get passed so quickly, Representative Mang, Representative Judy Chu in California has worked together in sponsoring this bill and really pushed this forward. You're seeing bipartisan support on this. So, this is the right time for the Asian Americans to push these agendas.
Right. So another question, let's see. Okay, no, so it was a little bit related, and in essence, it basically says, how can we prevent, it says the president, but let's say all future leaders of all types from using such inflammatory language? The basic answer is voting against the person. But is there, there's a structure, we have a constitutional structure, we have election structure, that's how things work. Anybody have brilliant ideas of how to how to prevent a leader from using inflammatory, negative, and frankly, racist language?
Well, I've spoken earlier about
a good book if you can come up with that, just so you know.
Yeah, I think that we have to start looking at hate speech to not be protected. Right now, it's protected under the First Amendment, and hate speech should not be protected because all violence, all hate crime starts with a speech, starts with words. Words does matter. So unless if we don't deal with it, we'll continue to have these things. If it's not this group, it's that group. We have to hold political leaders to their words. And if they are not, it's not just the voting. we know the voting does not work because so many of the people in the district, these people, terrible people, keep on getting re-elected because our system is not a good system.
Yeah, of course, the challenge of that, you have to vote also to amend the Constitution and revise the First Amendment. So that's
no. You cannot screen fire in a theater. So
yeah.
by extending that, you can extend hate speech to a certain limit. But then we have to fight in terms of probably to the Supreme Court. But unless we start fixing things like that, I mean, we have all the law there is. We don't need the Asian hate crime law in the federal level to protect us. We have all the law. We should not be getting protected, attacked in the first place. What's another law going to do to help us? I don't think anything's going to help us. The politicians going to think they look good. Oh, we did this. What did you do? It will continue to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. Any other ideas on how to prevent leaders from speaking poorly? That's a challenging question, I realize.
I mean, I can try to take a crack at it if you don't mind, Donald. I mean, First Amendment right it's a part of the Bill of Rights. It's a pretty monumental piece of legislation, obviously, and it protects a lot of different areas. And I understand the frustration there, Fred. I truly do. And I think we need to differentiate hate speech in terms of who is making those hate speeches. It's probably not an easy task, and it's a pretty monumental task to change the Constitution in terms of hate speech and free speech. But I will say that elected officials and elected leaders have to be held to a higher standard, right? I would say it is a fair statement that hate speech could be considered conduct unbecoming of an elected official, and that's subject to impeachment, for example, right? May not necessarily rise to the level of a felony on a regular citizen, but if someone is in the position of power, they should be held to a high accountability. And if they've exhibited unacceptable behavior that demonstrate conduct unbecoming of this office, they should be subject to public scrutiny and impeachment.
Yeah, very complicated issue, I'm sure. And then sort of we might have a few more questions. My question sort of almost is like, what's the underlying cause, right? And I go back to, I think of, the movie South Pacific, which was, when I was younger, I thought, boy, what a great movie. And I even, teaches about racism, it teaches about bias and prejudice. And I even pulled out the lyrics. And the first phrase says, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed into your little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. And that sounds great, but is that actually true? Are we just born good and we're taught to be bad? Or are we, this is like a philosophical question, been going on for as long as philosophy happens, right? Or are we born kind of evolutionary way from evolution, kind of suspicious of others? And what we really need to do is have civilization and teach people to love and be tolerant. And I tend to think that's actually the real world. And so just stopping people from hating is going to be hard. Maybe teaching them to be more tolerant and more civilized, maybe that's more of the answer. I'm not sure, but I don't know if you have a view on that. That's sort of like the big question underlying cause. Are people good or are people bad as a natural state of humans?
I think people are born good, but they're very vulnerable and they're susceptible because it's easier to scapegoat other people for their own fault. And we can see that in a child. They're all basically good, but they want to blame others for their own mistakes. And as humans, we keep on growing that way. And that's the nature of what's happening. So people have not grown up, even though they're 77 years old.
Yes. Yeah, well.
I guess my comment, I think, to Fred is, I truly believe when we were born, we were all innocent.
Yes.
It's all about education, uprising that are shaping up who we are today. So I guess education play a key role, you know, to correct mistakes and really to address the hate issue.
I'm sure. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
and I largely agree with that. I mean, you don't see, let's say someone holding a baby, right? Yeah, a baby doesn't just hate you, right? No matter what the color of your skin or color of your hair or the language you speak or how you dress, right? These things are learned, in the later part of one's life. So education plays an extremely important role in ensuring that these things don't happen again. And that's why dedicating resources to education in early education in our children and investing in that and then making them understand and educating them that racism is not okay, xenophobia is not okay, inclusiveness and diversity is the fundamental value and it's the fabric of our society. I mean, like I said again earlier, this country was founded by immigrants. And so, there's no perpetual foreigner in this country. And so we're all equal and we all, stay in this country in our rightful way. So, racism is taught. There's no question about it.
Right. I think teaching and maintaining tolerance is actually an active, everyday thing that we have to do. You see it, I'm reminded of the former Yugoslavia. There was a period of time where the cultures and religions and everybody was intermarried and living with each other. And then all of a sudden, at one point in time, it was like magnets with little shavings. They just pulled apart and started attacking each other. And it just has to be worked on all the time, continuously, right? There's no more questions in the chat room. And I'll give some closing remarks unless anybody has any final comments you'd like to make on any of this.
Well, I just want to add something to what Anders has said. I think that this country is founded by immigrants, but every group of those immigrants, once they establish themselves, they turn away new immigrants. Until those new immigrants establish themselves, then they turn away other immigrants. I can tell you that Chinese established immigrants, they don't like the new immigrants. Hispanic established, even though they're illegal, they're coming to the United States and now they're citizens, they don't want to see more Hispanic coming into it. We need to fix the problem. This country is to have too much hate and too much of me rather than sharing. So again, I'm just talking about the reality. We got to get down to the reality and not to just feel good. Otherwise, we will not be able to solve our problems.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you, Fred. Henry, anything else?
Yeah, I guess the takeaway from all this is really, I think efforts has to be cohesive, collaborative, and all-inclusive in addressing hate and AAPI issues in going forward. And I still believe it has to be a public-private partnership in order to work effectively and efficiently. So I also want to brag about, and actually that we should all be, I think this is part of education, to brag about AAPI accomplishments and achievement in business world, cultural, social, you name it. So I guess I would like to borrow a comment from Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning, right? Staying together is progress. And then working together boldly is success. I'm gonna borrow, Anders' word, bold. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you, Henry. Anders, any final comments?
Yeah, so, and I wholeheartedly agree and I resonate with a lot of the things that both Fred and Henry already said. One little takeaway, I live in the Bay Area, one of the most diverse places you probably would ever have to visit. You can visit, along with New York, obviously, Fred. I don't need to take that away from you.
Come.
I'll ride in your subway and I'll ask you to be the tour guide.
Sure.
But I live in the Bay Area where over 20 to 30% of our populations identify themselves as API. Many of them are ethnic as well. In general, the API community here of pretty well respected, and you know, we don't see too much of these serious hate crime, but yet we still, in the last few years, seen a really uptake of these things. And you know, part of it, and you have to look at the broader picture. How do you, as a society, how does, you know, one particular community get the recognition as well as have a say at the table? It's really, you know, to promote, you know, people within the community who share your ideology and be able to support them as a representation. You know, if you have a major metropolitan area where, you know, nearly 30% API population, and yet, you know, you don't see a similar percentage of representation in your legislature, in your council, in your county, you know, in your county elected offices and city elected offices. You know, if you don't have a say at the table, your agendas don't get heard, your voices don't get heard. And so, you know, we as Asian Americans, and I guess it has a lot to do with our historical culture, right? You know, it is true that not too many Asian countries have had a true democracy where people actually goes to the polling station and vote for their leaders, you know. And so with that said, I think this is something that we really need to look hard at ourselves and say, how much do we participate in this democracy? Democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a participatory sport. You know, if you don't vote, your voice don't count, right? If you don't elect a leader that can represent you, you know, you don't get the mic. It's just that simple, right? And so, you know, with that, you know, one thing that I wanted everybody on this call, and long after this call is over, and I want people to understand and have that as a takeaway, is that we need to participate. As an Asian American, as a Chinese American, as a first generation Chinese American, born and raised in Hong Kong, right? You have to participate, you have to vote, you have to sink in to, you know, be engaged in the community, and really take ownership of these issues, and say enough is enough. You know, for those who has the ability to make a difference, need to rise up, take leadership, and go make a difference, right? It is incumbent upon us to make those changes. Change don't come about just because we ask for it. We have to be the change. And for those who are capable, for those who has, I've always believed that when people ask me why I run for political office, and I resonate your reservation, Fred, about being a politician. I truly do. You know, it's those who has the ability to make a difference, has the responsibility to make a difference. And that's why I do what I do. I feel very proud of it. And even though it takes a lot of toll on my family, and I believe my wife is on the call right now, and she can testify to that. And so, you know, with that, and it's not just about one person. It takes the whole community, right? You know, the community need to get involved. They need to support. They need to have their voices, or they need to speak at the mic whenever it's available, whenever it's possible, so that people knows that you're serious and that you're upset and that you want change. And the people who you voted in power will facilitate those changes on your behalf. And that's how democracy works. And as real as it gets, you know, again, democracy in politics is not a spectator sport. You cannot sit there and wait for changes. You have to participate and be that thing.
It's almost as
Can I add?
Please try.
Okay. So first of all, I totally agree with Anders that we have to be politically involved. But I do not think we can use as excuse that we did not come from a democracy country, because the Jewish people didn't come from a democracy, they come from a Holocaust. The African American people did not come from a democracy, they came as slaves. And so many people come to this country because they want a better life. They didn't come from a better world to come here. Our system, whether we like it or not, this is it. This is the system. We need to know the system. We need to use the system. We cannot use some other format of a government somewhere else in the world and try to apply our ideology over here. This is it. The most important, I do think, is that we need to care about others. We need to care about the Muslim community. We need to care about the Jewish community. We need to care about the African American. We need to show compassion when they are hurt. Because if we don't care about them, why do they should care about us? And people support us, people vote for us, people do things for us because it's something we're doing for them. So I think I just want to leave everyone with that, is that we really have a long way to go to care about, learn about other people's demise, other people's unfortunate, and really extend our hand and go out and help them. And then we will be helped, or we will be protected.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that, Fred. You know, it's about bringing communities together, right? There are way too many marginalized communities in this country. And, you know, just being an Asian American, you know, by ourselves alone, it's not going to solve this issue. People have to come together, right? And there has been many attempts to pit one community over another, right? The African American community, the Hispanic, the Latino communities, pitted against the Chinese and American communities. You know, we've seen all of that tactic. And so, you know, instead of being divisive, we've got to let people come together. You know, we've got to promote that unity. And you're absolutely right on point in terms of how we must also demonstrate our care to other marginalized communities. Because if we can unite among all of us, imagine the amount of power we have, and how, you know, how big of that message can be and how people will resonate with that. And so, and that's one of the main reasons why when I held that May 15 rally in San Mateo County, and it's county-wide of 800,000 people population, you know, we branded it as Communities United. You know, instead of saying just API, instead of just about anti-hate, it's about bringing people together. It's about bringing all the communities together, whether you're LGBTQ+, you're Chinese American, Asian American, Black American, Latino American, African American, you know, Native American. It doesn't matter. You know, people need to come together and understand that hate has no place in this country. And yet this is one common goal that we need to unite behind, and really stamp out these racism as a whole, not just to a particular community. So.
Yeah. Well, on that hopeful note, I think we'll end this event. So these are important issues that obviously have a lot of work to be done, and we'll continue discussing within our Hong Kong Association communities and elsewhere. I want to thank the panel speakers. They've been excellent, and I think that's recognized by the fact that we've held our audience, even though we've gone almost an hour and a half long. So thank you very much for your good thoughts and comments. Thank you for Mark Staublin for his words as well. And thanks for the participating and the supporting Hong Kong associations, all the attendees, and also Michelle Mui and Hani Lee, who put a lot of time and effort for putting this together. And we hope to see you at other Hong Kong Association events in the near future. Please stay connected to the different websites. I think things will be shared with you for the attendees going forward. And we hope to see you again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.